All right, we are live. Welcome to the Kyle Milligan Show. What's up, Copy Squad? It's me and my buddy Rich Schefren here. We're starting a little bit late, but we're ready to rock and roll. And you were actually just telling me, so I was asking about your glasses because you got
Right.
some tinted glasses, and I was like, oh, those look like blue blockers. You got your blue blocking, but you said it's because you've been going so ham recently. And this is
Yeah.
kind of interesting to me that you had to get special glasses because you stare at computer screens too much all day, every day.
Yeah.
So, what is this? You were doing something with Jay Abraham and you've been recording like a gazillion webinars. What are you working on?
I'm working on a bunch of things, like I was telling you, my day-to-day life is pretty chill. And generally, I give 2 days a week to my company, Strategic Profits, and that's generally Mondays and Fridays. And then usually Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, I work with private clients, people like Agora Publishing or whoever else that actually pay me for my personal time to help them grow their businesses. But as things happen, sometimes I get involved in other businesses, and I'm currently involved in online casinos in Brazil, and also a commercial real estate appraisal business here in the U.S. And so all of a sudden, like it happens every once in a while, everything happens at the same time. And so those two businesses needed a bunch of my work. My clients needed a bunch of things. And then on the business front of Strategic Profits, I was dragging my feet on an AI project that we're going live with next week. It's called the AI 5, where we basically create a whole marketing campaign through real AI experts, not the people that just became AI experts 4 months ago when ChatGPT got released, right? I don't even consider myself an AI expert, but like I've been teaching about AI for since 2018. I was like presenting on it, presented at Todd Brown's event in 2018 about AI. So I don't consider myself one, and that I've been doing it for 5 or 6 years. Certainly don't consider anyone who's been doing it for 3 months one. And so we leveraged real AI experts to create an entire campaign from scratch to sell things, right? And then walk people through the prompts and the engineering that's involved so that they can do the very same thing. And so I recorded them a little whiles back, but I didn't record the intros to them, and I didn't record the outros. And the outros are with Jay Abraham, and so Jay and I were watching them this weekend so that we could record the outros. And then this morning I was recording some of the intros, and so was slammed with that. And then also we have a coaching program that is attached to Steal Our Winners, which is our core product. That Felicia Pagesh, who's a rock star marketer, actually is the core coach for. And we were creating a new webinar for that, which actually I want to circle back to not the actual webinar itself, but a core piece of that webinar, which I think would be useful, valuable, and interesting to everybody. So we're working on that webinar. So between working on the AI 5 and then the webinar this weekend, it's been nonstop. And then this morning I rolled out of bed and it is continued, but I see a light at the end of the tunnel. On Wednesday, my normal schedule starts to return, and then I end my days early and start a little bit later, which is awfully nice. But what I thought was interesting from the webinar, which I just want to share really quickly, and it was from a presentation that I gave back in 2018. I can even pull up the slides if it's interesting, but let me tell you what it is first. In this presentation, I was talking about what I see happening with AI. And like I said, this was in 2018. So we're talking about 5 years ago? 5 years ago. I was talking about how we're really at the beginning of a new era and what has happened in previous eras. And I think it's useful because I think most people miss it, and most people focus on the trees and not the forest. And because of that, they miss out on where really the big opportunities are. So if you look at the industrial age, the people that made the most money during the industrial age, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the Mellons, these kinds of people, right? They were not the masters of machines. They just built businesses that leveraged those machines. Right? They weren't the experts in steam engines. They weren't the experts in electricity, but they built businesses that could fully leverage that, right? Then if you look at the computer era, the people that made the most money were Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and people like that, right? They did not, their businesses at the end of the day were not just building computers, they were businesses that leveraged computing technology and were able to build the wealth that they built. And then in the next era, the internet era, right? The people that made the most, like Bezos, like Zuckerberg, et cetera, right? They were not the people that built the internet, but they were the people that built companies that could leverage the new technology of the internet that actually made the most money. And so it will not be the people that know the most about AI today, that can make the best prompts today, that can do those things that will make the most money. It will be the people that understand the tech enough to build businesses that leverage it. And the way to think, and so that's the core piece that just from the webinar that I thought would be interesting to share. And then as a person who knows a lot more about AI than today's so-called experts, but certainly not as much as real experts, what I can say is that, it's not intelligent, right? So let's start there. Artificial intelligence is kind of a misnomer. It's machine learning. And I just want to explain what machine learning really is. So, and in order to give you an appreciation of that, what I would say is that if you look at computers, all computers do at the end of the day is better arithmetic. That's it, right? They can do arithmetic faster, cheaper, and more accurately than a human can. And because of that ability to create better arithmetic, everything that you see that's been created by computing technology has been done. But at the end of the day, everything gets converted to 0 ones, and it's just better arithmetic. And so when arithmetic got better, cheaper, and faster and more accurate, everything that came from computers that we know and we think about from the iPhone and everything else, like, was just about better arithmetic. What machine learning is all about better prediction. Like, it's not intelligent. Like, when you ask ChatGPT the capital of New York State and it says Albany, it does not know that the capital of New York is Albany. It just knows that when you type in capital and you type in New York State, that what you're looking for is Albany. But it's unintelligent and it doesn't know that. It just knows that from a standpoint of prediction, that you, the user, that's what you're looking for. And so machine learning is about better prediction. And so if you're going to build a company that leverages this new technology and you become the Rockefeller of today, or the Jobs of today, or the Zuckerberg of today, then what you have to realize is that machine learning provides more accurate, cheaper, and faster prediction. And what kind of businesses are going to thrive when prediction becomes cheaper, faster, and more effective and more accurate? And that's maybe a conversation for another day, but I thought it would be interesting to just talk about, especially since this is the crap that I'm dealing with as I'm not sleeping enough this week and last. And Kyle, we've got some big UFC events coming up over the next month, and I hope that you come over. We had a good time yesterday, but of a small crowd, so I didn't send out any mass invites. Kyle and I live close by, and generally on big events, we have lots of people come over and watch them. Everyone from like Mark Ford, one of the founders, or AKA Michael Masterson, one of the founders of Agora, or co-owners of Agora, to Todd Brown, John Benson, Mike Filsame, et cetera, et cetera. We all live in the same area and we all love UFC.
Yes. And yeah, it is an interesting sort of thing to step into Rich's house and be like, I saw all your webinars this week. Like, I know all these people. Yeah. Another thing that's kind of cool is just kicking it with marketers. Marketers are fun to hang out with because they just think out. They're always forward thinking. And I feel like a lot of what I would call normies are kind of backwards thinking people. Like, they talk about what they did last week and this and that.
Right.
And marketers are always thinking like, what's coming? Like, what's ahead? What's on the horizon? Like, what businesses are going to be better as machine learning gets better at prediction? Like, that's the kind of weird stuff that marketers are always into. So I took little bookmarks, little notes about, because you got a lot of stuff to say and share. All the way back to where we were talking about Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays are private clients. So that immediately peaked for me as a person who, I'm going to share some of my failings in a nutshell right now as a businessman or copywriter or whatever. The big one is I can tell as I adopt more things that I get very shiny object syndrome. And even this little podcast channel that I have on YouTube was one of them. I saw it happen that when I was trying to line up clients, you only have 24 hours in a day. When I was trying to line up guests, not clients. And I saw that start to subtract from the agency. It subtracted from my copy instruction YouTube. But you are 1,000 different directions. You're me times infinity. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, private clients, where you're helping people build businesses. When you're getting these clients, is it just people like you were at work and someone's like, "Hey, Rich, can you help me out?" Like, how does something like that start? How do you end up doing that and doing it for 3 days every week?
Well, I'm not cheap. I'm actually quite expensive.
Yeah.
So it really is not your everyday business because I think it would be cost prohibitive for that. But I recognized a long time ago that the biggest successes that I've personally had, as well as the biggest successes that I've helped my clients have, whether it's Agora or Russell Brunson or Todd Brown or any of those people, right? Because I coached them early on. It was leveraging a strategy or tactic early in its inception. So like what put me on the map, so to speak, was writing a free report when everyone else was doing like 7-day e-courses. But so you could say that I certainly wasn't the inventor of it, but I was one of the early people that had like a lead magnet. Of course, early on, if you had a lead magnet, you had the potential to get a lot more from it than you could today. So like when I published that lead magnet called the Internet Business Manifesto, I got millions of downloads organically. And it really put me on the map, so much so that I spent the next 18 months to 2 years just writing free reports. Now, every report I wrote back then made me millions of dollars. The first one basically took me from unknown to somewhat known and turned my business from making like $20,000 to $30,000 a month to making $500,000, then $1 million a month. And then we grew from there. And so I saw the impact of a single strategy or tactic to totally explode my business. And then we were the first to live stream from an event. And we had 10,000 people show up with no advertising. And we made over, I think it was like $700,000 a minute when we actually opened the cart. And we only had 10,000 people on because we couldn't have any more people on because that was the maximum amount of bandwidth that you could actually have. AT&T was our partner on that, and that was their maximum. And we had 10,000 plus people. We had 10,000 people on. We had more than that show up, but the only reason they all did was because it was a live stream. Now, if I got on a live stream today or this live stream, right, like we'll be lucky to have a fraction of that. And it's not because the content is any worse or better, right? It's just because like you can't rely on live streams anymore to actually cause momentum in and of itself. Like, it's now something that everybody knows. And so that doesn't mean you shouldn't do live streams because we're doing it right now, right? Like, but we're not going to get like some insane benefit just because we're doing a live stream. And the very next thing was John Benson shared with me the VSL and I brought it over to Agora, and Agora grew by like about $1 billion that year because of the VSL. And in 2017, when we split tested those type of VSLs, no difference in response. But when we did it in 2008, a 400% increase in the United States. That means that every single sales letter that they had all of a sudden did 400% better. That 300% better in Germany, which meant every sales letter that we had in Germany all of a sudden did 300% better. That every sales letter we had in France did 250% better. And so on and so forth. And then the last example from my own personal life was the automated webinars. And then the same thing happened again, right? Like I gave the automated webinar to Russell Brunson, to Frank Kern, to Mike Filsaime, to a bunch of people. I tried to get Agora to get into webinars early back then, but they were doing so well with the VSL that they had no interest. And I saw that go again where like the results were explosive in the beginning because no one had automated webinars, but we did. And so I have always helped my clients kind of tap into what is that thing that's going to make their business explode. And so when it came time for me to reinvent myself, because I kind of took 5 years off in 2012 to 2017, because I went through a midlife crisis and kind of wanted to figure out who I was and what made me happy and what I was going to do with the rest of my life. When I got back in 2017, I sold half my business to Agora. And then in 2020, I bought it back. But in those years, I had to create something new. And I figured, like, why not create something that gave the world what has been most explosive and breakthrough for myself and my clients. And so that's what created Steal Our Winners. And so Steal Our Winners, right? We publish 2 episodes a week of strategies and tactics that are currently crushing it online that most people don't know about. And that makes me a highly valued person, because I'm the guy that all of those episodes go through, because people like Kyle, when they figure out something new and they want to be on record as being the person that figured that out, they share it in Steal Our Winners. And so when I get on a call with my clients, right, I am a database of what's currently working and what would grow this business the most, not because I'm so smart, but because I'm lucky enough to have a business that is the reservoir of what's working right now. And so when I get on a call with a client, that's what we're generally focusing on. Now, obviously, I have a lot of experience in operations and systems and strategy, because that's my background. But what really drives the business is these breakthroughs. And then as a coach, I'm providing that. And I'm also making sure that the operational side can withstand that kind of increase. And so that's how I spend my time on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. Now, when I got back into coaching, because I didn't do coaching from basically 2012 till about a year ago. But as I was doing, so basically my Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays were just absolutely free. And I got to become a biohacker and get into the best shape of my life and things like that. We sent out one email to our list saying I was going to coach again. And the way it worked was you put down $1,000 refundable deposit. That got you a half an hour with me. We would talk on a call. I can't sell myself out of a wet paper bag. That's why I became a great marketer. So that it's not a pitch call by any stretch. There's no setter, there's no closer. It's just me. And the business owner will talk maybe for a half an hour to maybe an hour. And we'll decide at the end whether, one, I think I can make a difference in that business, and 2, whether they would like to work with me the way I like to work. And not everybody does, so that's totally cool. And then if we both are in agreement that this is a good thing, then the way I charge is generally for a long time, people would pay me $5,000 an hour for my advice, $15,000 for a day if they flew down here. And, but I wanted to work with people over a longer period of time, because generally when people are paying those kind of fees, and I probably should charge a lot more on the day level, but whatever, they're coming to me with problems, right? Like urgent issues in their business that they've already tried to solve on their own. They couldn't. And now I'm there, right? Either because they have all this amazing growth in front of them, which I would say was only like 10 or 20% of the people that came to me to spend a lot of money. And the other 80 to 90% was like some crisis that could take the whole business down. And now they didn't have a solution. And so it was my role to provide it. My goal was to have a lot more people who didn't have either of those things, but just knew what I could do and wanted to work with me in some longer capacity, but no commitment, because I don't like any kind of commitment. I want people to work with me and decide each month, like, that if they got what they need, they don't need me anymore, then go on your way and you have my blessings. Or you don't like me and you don't like my style and you want to go on your own way, fantastic. Or if I don't like working with you, it's a two-way street. So instead of charging what I normally charged, I charged less. And the way I charge now is like for that coaching, right? And I only take, so right now my calendar is full and it's only 15 clients, because that's the maximum I could take. And we sold it out from one email with that kind of like $1,000 deposit. And then we talk and then we decide. People pay me either $5,000 a month, and we talk twice a month for what starts out to be an hour, right? But generally, those calls reduce in their length because we're able to like quickly get to the core of the matter. And generally, the relationship starts where we spend a half a day together. There's no extra charge for that, but that's just so that I'm not at the mercy of the client, because what I found with coaching was that if I don't have a big download period of time, then the client is just coming at me with problems on the calls and I'm trying to solve them. And I don't have any big picture view of the entire business and whether those are even the right things to focus on. So if I'm working with someone twice a month, I meet with them that first month for a half day. And if I'm working with them and they're paying me $10,000 a month, which would be 4 calls over the course of the month, I spend a full day with them. And then we just go to town. Now, what generally happens in some of those businesses is that it's not an intention of mine, it's not an agenda of mine, but it happens where there's an opportunity for me to get much more involved in the business, where now my participation isn't twice a month, it's almost daily, right? Especially like in the beginning, because now I'm becoming much more of an active role in that business and I'm getting a piece of that business for that active engagement. And that piece of the business is all on the upside, right? I'm not taking what's already there when I got there. And that's where the casinos currently are. That's where the commercial real estate appraisal is. But I don't have shiny object syndrome anymore. But I do have ADD, and so that is my natural proclivity, primarily because of my job for Strategic Profits, which is Steal Our Winners. And I hope that for as long as I humanly can, and as long as it's valuable to others, that I get to do Steal Our Winners. Because the way I look at Steal Our Winners, I already shared like the way I see the value it provides by providing like what's currently working. But for me, I still remember when I first started in this business back, in like the year 2000, and I was buying courses and like buying ebooks of those shiny objects, et cetera, et cetera. And nowadays, right, I get the person who invented the strategy, who's super excited about it because they're making a bunch of money from it right now, to hop on a Zoom call with me in that enthusiastic way and share it with me and then teach it to me. And like, that's what I would have killed for when I first started, right? That like the ebook that I'm like reading the ad for, that the owner of said ebook, the author of said ebook, would actually sit down with me and like when they first discovered it and share with me how I can do exactly what that book, that course, that program is promising. And so because of that, right, like I love Mondays and Fridays because on Mondays and Fridays, I get to be taught by today's top experts what they're doing to make lots of money. And then I try and carry that forward into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But, right, why would I want to go out and buy anything or be involved in anything? Because there's 250 contributors to Steal Our Winners. And when something pops for them, most of the time they get in touch with me or they bring it up the next time I hit them up, asking them what's new and what's working. And so because of that, like, I don't know that I've cured myself of shiny object syndrome. I've just gotten a new source for the fix. And I dig it, right? Like, I know you told me that Mark Ford did an episode with you, and Jay Abraham and I used to follow Mark's format. Mark taught it to me years and years ago, and Mark makes a joke that like I'm the only guy that he ever said I'm the only guy that took him up on the offer after he shared that coaching model. And his coaching model was, it's $1 million and you're going to pay me 4% of the increase in gross until the $1 million is paid. That was his model. He's like, or you can just go to the cigar bar with me and get me drunk and like, press me for all the information that I would have given you in those coaching calls. So I'm a Jew. I'm not only a Jew, I'm 100% Ashkenazi Jewish. Like when you look at my 23andMe, which is very rare, right? I was explaining that to my daughters last week because I married a non-Jew and we're separated now and whatever. But when you look at our 23s and me's, my daughters are both 50% Ashkenazi Jewish, but I'm 100%, not 99.9, 100, right? Which means for 5,000 years, every single one of my ancestors only married a Jew. And then I broke that chain, right? I'm the unique one that totally changed it. But because I'm Jewish, maybe, the idea of getting what I would have paid $1 million for free from hanging out with Mark, that seemed like a much more appealing proposition. So I never paid Mark the $1 million, but I did get him drunk many a times at many cigar bars. And Mark and I generally hang out once or twice a week. We grab breakfast together. And when he's doing his cigar bar thing, we get together there as well. I'm one of the 5 people that has a key to that place. And we hang out a lot. But I've done that deal. So Jay and I used to do that deal. We used to work with businesses and have them pay us $1 million over the course of however long it took to grow their businesses by 24 million or 25 million, because it was 25 million, because it was 4% of the gross. But I don't really do that anymore. I kind of like this kind of engagement. And then if there's an opportunity for me to really be much more involved in the business, then we kind of translate to that. But to answer a long-winded answer to a pretty short question, I don't know that I've overcome it, but I've just found a much more healthy way to fill that fix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for folks who just tuning in, I was basically asking where does this shiny object, I don't know what the question was, something like this shiny object syndrome impact you in the same way that it does for me? Because it's definitely something that, I don't know. Like, I've been doing the agency thing for like 2 years, and I feel like my original intent was to give it 3 years. I'm coming up on 2 in October.
Right.
And part of me wonders, I'm sure everybody sort of goes through this. Well, I bet the 80-20, I bet 80% of people go through this. Part of me wonders, like, am I a business guy? I haven't had any like outstanding early like pow success like as a business owner. Most of my success was derived from my copy days, writing copy, and I'm really good at teaching my writers and guiding them to successful promotions. But like the business stuff, because then I listen to someone like you, my head is actually going to all the operational hassles,
Right.
it's like I don't know how I don't trust anyone or even know anyone who's strong enough to allow me to do all this stuff. Like if I take my eye off the ball for a minute, something's going to break. An email is going to go out with some whack shit on it. Like a video is going to go out with Chinese instead of English subtitles. Like it's going to be some stupid shit like that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I do. And I would say that, yeah, there's a couple things that you said there. So one is that I disagree with you, that, I remember when you were just a copywriter at Agora and then you went off on your own, right? And you were telling me back then, if I'm remembering correctly, you were doing these copy critiques on YouTube and they were getting lots of traction, right? Maybe more than you expected them to get at its inception, right? So my experience has been that like when something like that happens, that there's a reason for that. And then my goal would be like, if I'm sitting in your shoes, how do I do a lot more of that? And how do I build the team around me so that I can do what was unexpectedly well received, so that because the market's telling me that that's what they want based on that. And then I would double down there. Now, if you don't have talent in developing the operational side, you either have to find that one unique person that can help you with that, or you find the one person who's just actually really good at that, and then they become like the person that's at your side. Like I've never run any of my businesses because I'm not capable of it. I don't stay on top of details. My eyes glaze over when we get too thick into the weeds, and I'm just not good at it, right? So there's that. And I also think what really drives that shiny object kind of issue, syndrome, whatever you want to call it, And it was funny because Jay and I were talking about it this weekend. Jay was a consultant and he kind of regrets ever leaving just that contingency style consulting and getting into the information business. But he did a protege program. And the very first time he did it, he sold it for $15,000. And that was when $15,000 is probably the equivalent of like $75,000 today. So imagine paying $75,000 to attend like a weekend training, and him having more people that wanted to attend than he could even fit in the hotel rooms, and then making even more money on the home study version that he was charging $5,000 for, which is probably the equivalent of $15,000 to $20,000. And it so far exceeded his expectations. And I, like all those examples I was giving earlier, all those examples, like when I wrote the report, I was hoping to get a dozen clients, not thousands upon thousands of clients. And I think that like any successful person that I talk to, any of the people that have come over my house, and they're not coming over my house because they're successful. They just, I guess you have to have some degree of success to live where we live and to be where we're at. And what I can say is that almost every single one, I would be shocked if someone didn't have it in that group, of having the experience of expecting X and then doing it and getting like 10X or 20X or 50X, right? And yeah, and that certainly has happened to me numerous times, and I know it's happened to most of my friends, but I don't know that most people in the market have ever experienced that. And so what drives shiny object syndrome in a certain way is like hoping to trip upon, fall upon, find that thing that is the thing that far exceeds their expectations. So if you've never had anything do that, then that would be a driver. Or if it only happened once, right? Like then you're chasing that fix for the rest of your life, right? I've never done heroin, but I've heard that like the first time you do it, it's absolutely insanely great. Or the first time you do crack, it's absolutely insanely great. And then the rest of your life, every other time you're doing it, you're chasing that first high. And I can tell you that like when I had that report go viral and people were talking about me all over the world and all that kind of stuff, that like that was insanely great and something I never expected. And certainly had I not achieved other successes that I wasn't expecting as well, I'd probably be still chasing it because it was so far and different from my day-to-day experience that it was like, holy crap, if life could be like this daily, whatever, right? And so I think that's a part of it, that either they've never had it or they've had it on a very infrequent basis. And so they're chasing that fix of finding that next thing that could be that thing that is that far exceeding expectation kind of event.
Okay. So you've sort of almost tasted like this sort of serendipity once. And so shiny object syndrome is sort of perpetuated by it. I mean, that's kind of the story behind me getting into Agora Financial in the first place. Was my story was I was trying to sell my novels. I was self-publishing a couple novels, and my goal for that, just listen to the parallels in this. My goal for the novels was to sell enough novels that I'd collect about $300 a month passive income. I was like a big time passive income subscriber at that time. So I was gonna make $300 a month with passive income selling novels, but I didn't know how to sell them. So upon Googling and discovering this term copywriting, I Googled just the term copywriting. And that's when I land on a Joe Schefren and Kevin Rogers podcast. And the podcast, Joe announces he'll put you up in a house. He'll train you for 8 weeks. He'll teach you the art of copy. He'll teach you how to do copy at the highest level. And I'm like, well, I need that so I can sell my novels. So I walk into Agora Financial blind. You got all these people wishing, hoping, praying for the chance to work at this company. And I get the emails now. I'm on the other side of it. I'm like sitting in the seat Joe might have been sitting in a while back. And you got all these hopefuls that their whole life hinges on being accepted as a copywriter. And I walked in, zero fucking clue. Like I didn't know what Agora Financial was, and I didn't know what copy was, which is why I was there in the first place. I don't know, just sheer dumb luck. And so I go on to get, this little record here. I actually move on to get my own team at Wealth Press with this craft of copy. And it's there that I generate my first like personal $1 million a year. I paid a writer $1 million in royalties, like someone under me as a cut of royalties. So I did have a bunch of success. Again, sheer dumb luck. And then the YouTube thing is kind of like I enjoyed it. I enjoy like being I like the position as one of the only guys on the actual YouTube platform that's teaching actual copy technique instead of just like selling the $10,000 a month dream. So I like that stuff. And then I want to do like I want to do a lot of stuff. The podcast, this thing. I'd love to do this more regularly. But then it's like I'm hitting people up. I'm getting on Calendly's. I'm sending out, and it all of a sudden starts getting to like what you're saying. I'm in the details, and I'm like, I hate this. I don't even want to do the podcast anymore. I'd rather just go do something else. Like just because it's the same thing. Like I have these spreadsheets now for our info publishing business, which is basically just selling like copywriting courses and stuff like that. Boy, I'm the guru, right? I'm the guy that does the training and the knowledge. And I also, in a way, am the marketer in that I have to be the face of like all the YouTube stuff, and I have to be the face in the sales pages and anything like that. And I have to be the face during the trainings. And I don't want to do the spreadsheets. So it's like, I guess I breathe this.
Is this, and I'm gonna like say this, and then I'm gonna just walk back there for a second, but I'm gonna hear everything that you say. I'm just gonna grab another coffee. If I'm sitting at like the difference between you and I guess, right, is if I'm sitting in this video podcast role, and I'm enjoying doing it, but I'm not enjoying any of the other things, then I'm quickly thinking about, okay, what needs to change about this so that like maybe it's not making me enough money, so I can't necessarily hire a bunch of people around it, whatever. So I'm like, okay, what needs to change about this so this can be income producing, so that then I can just show up and do the part I like, and that the money that gets generated provides like for the other talent to do what's necessary so that I can do the part that I like, but recognizing that it might have to be altered a little bit. Maybe there's a commercial every 30 minutes. Maybe there's something, right, that like makes it so that money is generated so that other people will be willing to get paid to do said late work so that I get to do what it is I like. And that's kind of the way I've always approached it. Like I will play around with lots of things, and then the things that work do kind of morph, and all of a sudden like a lot more stuff is necessary. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. So, but before I give up on the thing that I really enjoy of it, I'm trying to figure out if there's a way that I can actually get it so that others do that. And yet I get to do what I want. They get paid to do the other parts. And maybe I even make money off it now because now I'm even thinking about it differently. And that's kind of how it goes for me, at least. Like it's that I will try lots of things, a lot of things I don't like doing. So then it's over, right? Like, or like I do something, I really enjoy it, but there's not like a monetary thing that's strong enough. Like I was doing live streaming twice a week, like during COVID and then beyond that for a while, until the guy that runs my business, Matt Risby, another copywriter from Agora, but he came from Stansberry, said to me like, hey, you created some great audiences that we can advertise to by doing all these live streams. But I think it would be better for the company if you didn't do them so often, because like we need people to have a desire to spend money to get more access to you, and you're too much out there. Right. So that was something I enjoyed doing. But based on that feedback from Matt, there was no way around that part, because what I was enjoying was the interaction. So in that particular case, I just had to kill that, because even though I was enjoying it, it was actually doing damage in a way, you could say. I mean, not like significant damage, but damage nonetheless in what my overall agendas were. So I just had to put the kibosh on it, because there was no way to figure out like, well, maybe I get some ads for it. Maybe I do this. And now it becomes an even bigger thing. But then that's going to rob the business of what it needs from me, which is some exclusivity and ability to have me behind a big enough wall that people are willing to spend a bunch of money to get on the other side of that wall. So I'm just grabbing my coffee, but I can hear you. It's just in that red zone.
All right. Rich is stepping into the red zone. I think that's interesting too, because that was something that I struggled with the YouTube channel. It's a lot of the same stuff. Like when you start introducing paywalls, what goes behind the paywall, what gets guarded, and what do you give away for free? That was definitely something that, as I was doing copy breakdowns, live streaming on YouTube, that was like my initial like foray into YouTube in this way and trying to figure out what I want to do in terms of teaching. It also started out as a way for me to stay accountable to my copy practice, that I would be practicing getting better at copy every single week. So I do these lives to hold myself accountable. But those ended up going behind the highest paywall I have now. It's like my most valuable content, and it's part of our inner circle program. But then I've got these other programs. I guess I'm just less physically present inside of there's a thing called Copy Squad Lite, and that's just like a giant community. And what I'm trying to do is replace the value of just me as one person, like in the inner circle, with the fact that you have a giant community. And the community also features like me, my past writers, my current team, all that stuff. They're in there. I'm still sorting it all out, but I'm really happy with where we're at with Copy Squad Lite. And I didn't put the kibosh in Copy Squad Inner Circle, but I've essentially stopped advertising it altogether as we continue to build out. My Copy Squad Lite program is got elements of like community, but also it's got sort of a similar thing to Steal Our Winners, where I'm inviting my friends, like my marketing buddies, to come on and share something for like an hour every month. And just, we've got you coming on this month. I'm not 100% locked in on what it is that we're going to cover, but I'm sure it'll be valuable. I'm not sure if we've lasered in on that yet. But yeah, so that's kind of how we do that. And, you know, we keep that stuff in the recording vault for them. So yeah, it's a lot less intensive as Steal Our Winners. And by the way, do you want to tell everyone, because you've talked about it quite a bit, do you want to tell everyone where they can go if they want to check out Steal Our Winners?
Sure. It should really be stealourwinners.com. We own that domain, but it's not there. So I'll tell you where it's at. It's strategicprofits.com, which is, been the name of my company for the last 20 years or so. So it's just like it sounds, strategic, STRATEGIC, profits, PRO. There you go. Strategicprofits.com. It kind of looks like Netflix, but every episode is a money-making episode. Every episode is anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. We have approximately 200 plus contributors. I think a little bit more than that. A lot of those contributors are some of the top marketers and media buyers, copywriters, etc. around, and they're dropping their knowledge when something is working really well. And we break that down, like exactly what do they mean by working well, and then how could you do the same exact thing. And I know that we'll be talking about, I think in the Copy Squad, what are those things right now that are working insanely well for people, so that other people, and why that's so important, and understanding, because my belief is that, and I don't know if I'm sure that at some point in time we've had some kind of deeper philosophical kind of conversations, but one thing, as someone who has taught entrepreneurs for a really long time and also learned a lot of things over the years, one thing I'm always been fascinated about are distinctions. And what I mean by distinctions are, these are concepts that live in language, that when you are exposed to them, they then become a filter of the way that you see the world. And I can tell you that, like, what made the initial internet marketing gurus was that they got online with a bunch of distinctions from direct response that most people didn't have. Me being the coach of many of these people, I can tell you that I'm pretty confident that this was the thing, right? That we saw customer acquisition and lifetime value in these concepts. We were able to look out into the world and see things differently because these distinctions lived in our minds. And so we spotted opportunity that other people did not spot. And therefore we could do things that other people couldn't do. Just like I know nothing, absolutely zero about trees. And so if I were to walk through a forest today, all I would see are a bunch of trees. But if I spent a day with a forester and they started pointing out like the different trees and what they're good for, and you could use this to create fire really easily, and you could live off this one, and you could whatever, then every walk through a forest from that point forward would be different than all the walks prior. That all of a sudden I would see things that I didn't see before. And because I could see things that I didn't see before, I could do things that I couldn't do before. And so I don't remember really what got me down this tangent, and I apologize, but I think that like those distinctions of now I do. So those distinctions of understanding where do breakthroughs come in business allows you a much better chance of spotting them. Right. And so we'll be covering that on the Copy Squad as well, because there is no doubt that if you spend time online, you're already coming across these breakthroughs. They're not hidden, but they're invisible to you because you don't have the distinctions to spot what those breakthroughs are, because they're just there, just like me walking through a forest right now, because I know crap about trees. And so once you know those distinctions, like I can tell you what's working today, but what's even better than that is how can you know in your walk through the internet, right? As you click on links and spend time in front of your computer, how can you spot that thing that right now you're just stepping over, but is there, that could have the potential to radically change your life and your business life, and therefore your financial destiny?
Yeah, that's a lot of so in that idea, the distinctions, that's kind of one of the key concepts for me in learning copy was going from a passive reader to an active reader. And it's through that I developed the distinctions of NESB, new, easy, safe, and big, and these other labels like
Yeah.
like the beats of a sales letter, as I call it. And I got that idea from Joe, and maybe he got it from someone else. But the idea that when you're reading copy, don't just read it passively as if you were a consumer. Try to see in between the lines and dig deeper. And so I see this all the time. I'll get people, actually less these days because we've been more cognizant of it, but I used to get a lot of complaints about our email marketing being too aggressive inside of my list. And they're like, we wish you would give us more value. And I had to hesitate to not be like, you fool. The email, read it, swipe it. I'm giving you 2 emails a day. You want more value. I'm literally giving you 2 swipes every single day. And
Right.
you're complaining that you're not getting any value from my emails. And the irony there is I'm literally giving away my formula twice a day. And you're just not following. You're too blind. You're walking through the forest, stepping over gold.
Right.
Why do you send so much marketing? It's like, bitch, what do you think this is? I'm a copywriter sending you traffic driving emails to a course that teaches you about email marketing. Like, it's like and then the ironic
I'm trying
part
to
is,
tell you, but at the same time, I'm sending you an example of exactly how you make money. And you're only seeing the advertisement for the course. You're not seeing what actually drives sales for that course because you're so quick to reject.
right? They're so quick to their brain, the thing that they're programmed to find is, where is the free how-to value, and they have this lens and scope. I see it, it's so prevalent. If you sell anything, it's a grift or a scam. And it's like, some people just sell stuff, bruh. Like, some people have had a lot of success, and maybe, pimps in the 1970s said that the game is to be sold, not told. And it's like that, man. Like, I had to do all this ass busting hard work to figure it out. And then there's some dude who subscribed to took my free lead magnet, which is full of value, now feels entitled to all the secrets on top of that. And it's just like, some people are just selling it, dude. It's not a scam.
I agree. Totally.
So circling back here,
Yeah,
I have
your lead. So tell me where you want to go.
so much stuff here. And the stuff that I find the most fascinating at a personal level,
Mm-hmm.
because all I do is talk copy 24/7. So that stuff sort of like, sometimes I just want to talk about something else. The stuff that I really enjoy that you bring to the table is the way that you help other businesses, the way that you have figured out a way to charge for your time, the way that you built all these different things, and yet you're still only doing the stuff. Because I mean, what really stuck out for me big time when you were talking earlier is like my eyes glaze over. When you said that line, I was like, yes, that's such a
Mm-hmm.
big deal. And you mentioned Matt. And so Matt has held a number of roles because he was at Agora back in the day. What's sort of like the story behind that? Because how does he move through his career to end up where he is today working with you? What did that look like?
Well, so I think the first time you and I met, right, was when you were going through the copy program at, right? Is that right? Like, I was like a guest
Mm-hmm.
instructor one day.
Yeah.
Not necessarily teaching copywriting, because I wouldn't say that like I'm any kind of world-class copywriter. That's not my gig in life. I've written a few sales letters. They've done well, but it's grueling and painful for me. And so I'm even shocked that like what put me on the map was writing, because I just never thought that would be the case. So Matt Matt had a dad in this industry, Buck Risby, right? And I remember promoting one of Buck's courses, Pipeline Profits, that he did with Frank Kern, because Frank and I go way back as well. And although I haven't spoken to him in years, he's not good at returning texts, so I don't text him. So I don't really know how much of that impacted him. I would assume a lot, having grown up somewhat in the industry. But however he did, he found his way to Agora and to Stansberry and became a copywriter at Stansberry. He got an education there, and then eventually left Baltimore, moved to San Francisco, and freelanced and did stuff on Twitter to get clients, and then created like a copywriting course and etc. And then Evaldo, who was a top copywriter at Agora, and Pete Coyne, who was a top publisher at Agora, and I don't know who else, was at, I believe it was Justin Goff's like first mastermind, but it could have been also Kevin Rogers. I don't know which one it was. And someone, whether it was Schefren or Evaldo or Pete Coyne, but someone mentioned that we were looking for someone to work in my little speck of a place inside the Agora universe. And Matt was interested. And I think we also sent out some emails on it too. And Matt kind of pursued that, got chosen for that, not by me. It was, I think, either Pete or Joe, and came into my universe there. What having the experience that I've had with Agora, because I worked for them for about 21 years. I just stopped working with them last year, where the one division that I was working most closely with was carrying the company at that point. Agora Financial, Matt Inslee runs that. And that was 2 years ago. Matt Inslee was really carrying all of Agora. Then some of the divisions were profitable again because they kind of changed a bunch of things, which, I don't know if you've talked about or not talked about, but that's a whole nother conversation. And so, I was with Agora when they were a $150 million company. I was with them when they were a $1.8 billion company. And I'd like to think that I played some role in that growth. And it would be, as a kind of fiduciary responsibility, I would never leave someone at their most poignant point of need. So I wasn't going to leave just when the one thing that I helped them with was making money. But once everything was making money, I kind of like, not that they're at their heyday like they were before, but at least more than one division that I'm working with is making money. It was time to extricate myself. And I personally hated the bureaucracy that I saw in Agora as the company grew. Mark and Bill, who I have a relationship with, they tried to not have that, but I think it just got away from them with Miles and Matt, Miles being the CEO, Matt Turner being the head of legal. And so my experience inside of Agora was nothing like my experience inside of Agora 20 years ago. And so I didn't like it. I'm close friends with Neil Patel, and Neil Patel has clients like LinkedIn and Facebook and stuff like that. And to me, and Neil Patel makes a lot more money than me. He's a lot more successful than I am. But I would hate my life if I was doing what he does, because I do not like working with bureaucrats, and I do not like working with people that are playing politics. And when you deal with big companies, that's where it's at. That's how it is. And unfortunately, I felt like that's how Agora had become. And I don't want any part of that, right? Like back, I was going, I've done well, right? So we have this nice house here in Delray, but we have a house out in the Hamptons in New York. We have a really nice penthouse in Manhattan and a couple other places. And so I was taking the train on Monday mornings at 5:30 in the morning, which is an ungodly hour for me, to Baltimore, and then spending Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then sometimes taking the train back Wednesday night, sometimes taking the train back Thursday night. So I was spending 3 to 4 days a week at Agora. And I did not like the bureaucracy that I saw there. So even though the team of people I was working really closely with was great. I love Joe Schefren. I love Pete Coyne, right? I love Ivaldo. I love these guys. But dealing with everything else was like a shit show and unpleasant. And so it was kind of grinding on me. Matt then got involved as well. And then at some point, Pete, Ivaldo, Katie, who was the head of media buying, and Pete, Katie, Joe, and Ivaldo wanted to leave Agora because they had gotten sick of the politics too. And Matt was new, so he was just kind of swept up in all this. But we proposed to Miles that they let Strategic Profits out of the ecosystem that is Agora, right? And there was only one division that was outside the ecosystem, which was Stansberry. And there's no shock as to why Stansberry was thriving, because they were not taxed with the same stuff that every other division was. They had more freedom. And because they had more freedom, they did better because they were not tied to that bureaucracy. So we proposed that Joe, Pete, Katie, Valdo would leave AF and go into Strategic Profits, the name of my company, which was then co-owned by Agora, and that Strategic Profits would lead the ecosystem of Agora, but still be co-owned by Agora. And unfortunately, Miles did not see the wisdom in that. He thought that if we did that, then everyone would do that, which might have been a good thing anyway, because they still would have owned us. But because they didn't want to do that, Pete, Joe, Katie, and Ivaldo left. And once Pete, Joe, and Ivaldo and Katie left, then I wasn't staying. And so I bought the business back and I left. And with me came Matt. And the only reason that Pete, Joe, and Ivaldo and Katie were going to go into Strategic Profits was so that they could stay in Agora but not be taxed by the bureaucracy of Agora. But once I'm buying Strategic Profits back, we're not in Agora at all. So there's no reason for them to be in Strategic Profits. They can do their own thing on their own, right? The reason we wanted to still be co-owned by Agora is because of the deep pockets and connections that Agora had. But if we don't have that, then we don't have that, right? So Pete, Katie, Joe, and Ivaldo went on to do their own things, right? Since that time, just to kind of, and I think I know you, I don't know if you know this whole story, but I know you know what a baller Joe is. Joe went to another company called Crowdability because his friends owned that. They gave him a piece of that business, and he started growing that business. At some point, Agora came to their senses, but it was way too late. And they wanted Joe Schefren to come back and become CEO of Agora. And Joe said, no, thank you, because like he was already gone. Then MarketWise, which is the public company that was started by a SPAC, a $3 billion SPAC that acquired Stansberry and therefore Legacy, because Legacy was a co-owned subsidiary of Agora and Stansberry.
Keep chatting. I'm going to top off my coffee, but I keep going.
Yeah. So they, Stansberry. So that's the name of that company is now MarketWise. It's a public company. They tried to get Joe Schefren too. Everybody wants Joe because Joe is that good. And so they wanted him to come in, and just like he declined the CEO role of Agora, he declined that as well. But Joe is such a baller that Legacy then went out. Legacy, MarketWise went out and bought Crowdability just so that they could get Joe, right? They bought the whole company. After Joe said he wasn't leaving Credibility, they still wanted Joe, so they bought the whole company just so that they could get Joe. And so Credibility is now owned by MarketWise, but Joe, which Joe is a part of, and then Joe also owns an agency with Katie and Pete and Evaldo, where they do what agencies do. And so that's the story there. And Matt came with me to Strategic Profits to learn more about what we do. And now he runs the day-to-day of Strategic Profits. And I would say that he's still on a little bit of a learning curve, right? But he gets better every day. And he's just, figuring out, as we do kind of in our early 30s, I'd say, who we are, what we're about, what we like, what we don't like, what we're good at, what we're not good at, and how we want to spend the rest of our lives. And I'd say, like, me in my mid-50s now, I've kind of been there and done that. That's part of what my midlife crisis was about. I thought I had figured it out. And then when I got to my 40s, I figured out that I was wrong. So I had some reevaluating to do. Hopefully Matt doesn't have to go through that. But Matt uses his copywriting ability on a daily basis. And it's interesting because he's very recently become a much better business leader. Very recently. Kind of reflected on how he was running the day-to-day up until a couple months ago. And then I could see a change of direction in him where he all of a sudden started to realize the value of project management and sometimes being the asshole in the room, right? That one of the things that I've had two primary mentors in my life. My dad, I wasn't very close to my dad. He was a sociopath. He screwed me over. So I guess there was a part of me that was always looking to replace my dad. And I found two great people to replace my dad. And one was Jay Abraham and the other one was Mark Ford. And so those two guys are like dads to me. And I couldn't have wished for better people to learn from, to guide me. And so one of the things that Mark said and has said, and I think he just said it numerous times, he's probably written about it too, is that the natural place for a business is no profit. If things are left to their own devices, the business will have no profit. And why is that? Because of all the external pressures on that business. You have employees that want to do the least and get paid the most. You have customers that want to pay the least and get the most. And if you look at all the things that circle a business, you will see that that is pretty continuous, right? Customers want more and pay less. Employees want to do less and get paid more. And so you have all these forces on a business that will push that business to no profit. And Mark said, you have to be the piece of sand, in the oyster, that is the irritant that creates the pearl, right? You take that pressure that is being caused and be that little irritant that then makes the thing profitable. And so in order for a business to be profitable, there needs to be someone that from time to time is the asshole, that holds people's feet to the fire, right? That like make sure timelines are hit, that when someone's not carrying their weight, there's a conversation about it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So I saw that, I've seen that evolution recently in Matt, that he's much more willing now to be that asshole. And not that he is an asshole, he's actually the furthest from it, but sometimes you have to play that role. And so I'm very, very proud of him. And I don't mean that in a condescending way whatsoever, because it's not something that I can do. It is something that I do for my clients all the time. It's really interesting. It's like psychology, right? Which I don't pretend to understand completely, but I play that role for my clients all the time. Like I have no problem firing people for my clients. I have no problem renegotiating deals for my clients. But when it comes to my own stuff, I get all squirrely and weird inside. Like I don't want to fire that person, even though I know that person needs to be fired. And I don't want to have that difficult conversation that needs to be had, maybe because at the end of the day, it all comes back to me. And when it's for my clients, it's not me. Like, this is what's best for that person. And that's it. Right. Right. Like, go ahead.
Is it possible that in your business though, because I've had to fire people.
Yeah.
And
I've fired people in my life. Sure.
Yeah. So I've had to do it too. And one of the biggest struggles for me was, I don't know, I haven't fired anyone in a minute, is that I feel like it's a reflection of I've failed. Like this person wasn't succeeding because I failed to give them the mentorship or I failed to give them the motivation, or I failed to give them the tools. Every time I fired someone, I almost like apologized for it. Like, you failed because I wasn't a capable enough mentor or boss or something. And that always was like the hardest part, is I always felt like you didn't get fired for your incompetence or your lack of performance, which is always there. But the lack of performance that's why they got fired. But I would internalize that lack of performance as my fault. And so I would struggle and delay firings and go to bat for people that probably needed to get let go a lot earlier. And that, I don't know if you resonate with that at all.
Myself included, like left to my own devices without thought, I will generally carry people way too long, and I will fire them when I actually look forward to firing them because I've carried them for so long, right? Which is not a good way to go about things at all. What I found was the best way to fire people when I'm firing someone for myself, not for my clients, which, like I said, I have that for some reason is super easy. Generally, I have them fire themselves. And the way I do that is that I've had numerous serious conversations leading up to that point. So when the conversation comes down to firing, right, I kind of lay out what has transpired. Like, if it was Kyle and I and we were role playing right now, I'd be like, Kyle, like, we spoke 2 months ago and I told you X was a problem and you said you were going to handle it, and it hasn't been fully handled. And then we also spoke about Y a month ago, and you said that, like, or I gave you a warning about X or whatever, but there's a sequence of things that have transpired that have led us to this point. And I lay them out, and I'm like, let's just role play here for a second. If you're me and I'm you, what would you do in this situation? Right. And every once in a while, they're like, well, I would give me another chance. And I'd be like, that's why you're where you are. And that's why I am where I am. And then I'll explain that I have to let them go. But most of the time, they say, well, if I were sitting in your shoes and you were sitting in my shoes, I'd probably let you go right now. And I'd say, well, unfortunately, that's why we're here. Right. Like, so I also found, though, and this was just from my own experience, and it kind of like surfaces in what I just said, that if you have continual conversations about performance, right, then talking about negative performance is relatively easy. But if you never talk about performance and now you all of a sudden want to talk about negative performance, it's a much bigger deal, right? And so what I found was if you kind of create a culture where you're talking about performance consistently, and hopefully you're talking about great things, right? Like, but you're talking about performance, good or bad, consistently, then it makes it much more easy and a lot less stressful to have that final conversation, because it's not something that is like, hey, Kyle, like this Friday, we got to have a conversation. And you're like, what the hell are we going to be talking about? And you're all uptight about that conversation coming up. And I'm all uptight about that conversation coming up. But if we talk every Friday about performance, then that's just what we do. And I'm not uptight about it at all. And you're not uptight about it at all leading into that conversation. But that conversation is going to end maybe differently than you thought it was this Friday. And so when you have a culture that talks about performance on a consistent basis, it becomes a lot easier to let people go. And it's also doesn't become this big conversation that needs to be scheduled, which entrepreneurs will delay and drag their feet on all day long if they haven't had that continual conversation. That's my thought.
Like thank you. Like, thank you for sharing that insight. Like, thank you for sharing that perspective. I wonder about the mat thing, like the mat. And how old were you when you found like your two surrogate father mentor figures? Like you say Jay and Mark, or those. How old were you when you bumped into those guys?
Well, the first thing I would say is that wasn't a conscious thought, right? This is me like talking in hindsight, like what was really going on. I was never like, gee, my dad sucked. It would be great to find different dads, right? But like I had this hole inside me that I guess like was fostering this desire to find someone else and then to act accordingly. And I think the act accordingly part is really important. And I'll get back to what I mean by that in a second. So I like the story with Jay is kind of unusual, and it's a little bit embarrassing on my part, but screw it. I'm not embarrassed by anything in my past, so I'll share it. My ex-wife and my current girlfriend will tell you that I share way too much and it's embarrassing to them, but I'm an open book. So the very first, I was first a customer of Jay's, became a client of Jay's, then became a partner of Jay's, became like a super close friend of Jay's, and we're still partners and super close friends. And I think I'm his longest standing partnerships as well, and also longest standing friendship from business as well, like, because I know how Jay plays and I can bend accordingly. But I remember the first thing of Jay's I came across, and it was PEQ1, and this was in the 90s, and he was charging $5,000 for a set of videotapes, which is probably like the equivalent of like 25K or something like that for a set of videotapes today. And I had never bought any info product before, and I couldn't imagine that any set of videotapes would be worth that kind of money. But it came with risk reversal. And so I bought it with the intent, and I hate to say this, but this is true. I bought it with the intent of returning it. But because the sales letter was so good and it piqued my interest, and if it really could do all those things, I wanted it, but I couldn't see that it was really worth that amount of money. So I bought that program, and at the same time, I bought a dual VCR so I could make copies of said program so I could watch it again after I returned it. And as I was watching it, I was blown away at how good it was. And then I felt like I came in with ill intention, but I am not unethical. And so as I was watching it, I was like, this is damn good. This is actually worth that exorbitant amount of money. I'm going to keep it. Right. So I never returned it. Thank God. Right. And I ended up buying a bunch more things. Then a few years later, Jay had this special offer that he did, which was that you could pay for his consulting over an elongated period of time. So Jay charged back then $5,000 an hour, which thought was pretty extreme and excessive, but he had this special going on where you could buy 4 hours for $20,000, but you could pay him off $1,000 a month. And so I took him up on that offer and flew out to California for those 4 hours and met him there. And we really hit it off. And he gave me some great advice. But the company that I wanted advice for was already on a downward spiral. And even though he gave me great advice, I had some partners in that business that kind of screwed me over. So at the end of the day, like, that business did not turn around the way I needed it to. And back then, I was one of the first guys that had an Amex Black Card, right? This was when the Amex Black Card was actually plastic. And when I used it in stores, they weren't even sure they could accept it because they didn't know what the hell it was. And the reason why was that I was charging about $4 or $5 million on my Amex card, not for personal purchases. I'm not that kind of guy. But I was running all the advertising for my hypnosis centers through my Amex card. And the reason I was doing that was I was running pretty much daily full page ads in newspapers and in the newspaper of the Daily News. And it was effective for me to put that on my Amex card because they would charge me once a month. And then if I put that on my Amex card, I got another 30 days to pay. So I had like 60 days float from the ad to when I needed to pay for it, but money was coming in from the ad immediately. So I got the play of money. So I put the consults with Jay on my Amex card. And after Jay getting the first $3,000, month 1, month 2, month 3, Amex took my black card away because I think I owed them like $500,000 or $600,000 on it, and my business was struggling, so I hadn't paid it. So Jay called me and he's like, I thought we hit it off. I thought you were this ethical guy. Like, now you're screwing me. And I guess Jay had experiences of like, once someone stops paying, they never pay again. And I said, Jay, look, I know I owe you money. I can't afford it right now, but I will get back on my feet shortly. And when I do get back on my feet, I will pay you. And he would call me and bother me for money all the time. He called me and said, like, hey, I'm thinking about buying my wife a new bag. Does your wife have any bags, like a Gucci or Prada bag, that maybe you want to send me? Take it from your wife and we'll knock down some of the debt. Or I'm thinking of getting a new car. Do you have any cars? Maybe I'll take one of your cars. And, like, he would just mess with me. I've asked him numerous times, like, what the hell were you doing? Like, did you just have free time on your hands and you wanted to screw with people? But anyway, he would call me and do this. And I'd say like it probably like
it sounds like the mob. Like, it sounds like the mafia calling you.
Those were unpleasant calls. And so I finally got back on my feet, brought in a bunch of money. I went to the very first internet event that I ever went to. I was invited as a guest by David Garfinkel to Mark Joyner's event in California. I met Matt Basak there and a bunch of others. But since I was flying out to California for that, I figured it was time to make right with Jay, right? I stopped by his office. He wasn't there. But I brought a check with me for $17,000 to pay him off. And I left a note saying, I told you that I would pay you, right? Here's the $17,000 in full, right? At this point, you should have only gotten paid $6. You got paid $3, but now you're a year and a half ahead of schedule, right? And sorry for the inconvenience, Rich, right? And I guess that's very unusual. And so he called up and followed up with me and he said, Rich, that's why I was being so difficult with you. You seemed like an ethical person. I couldn't believe that you were screwing me. And the fact that you just paid me a year and a half ahead of schedule shows who you really are. And if you ever do anything interesting and there's a place for me, I would love for you to give me a call. And so I went on my way and got online at some point, and I joined a coaching program. And at that time, Stephen Pierce was like one of the big people online. For those that have been around a long time, you might have heard of his name. For those who haven't, he hasn't been online for a long time, so you might not. And I was in Stephen Pierce's coaching program learning about internet marketing. And I met Stephen for the very first time. I was already in his program, but I met him for the very first time at Big Seminar. And I was super excited to meet him. And I showed him my notes that I had taken on every call that I had been on. And I was an early mind mapper. So that was something that most people had never seen back then. And he was blown away by these notes. He had never seen anything like that. And it was all his material.
Yeah. Would you do a quick little explanation for mind mapping?
Instead of like linear notes, right? Like just down a page, right? You have this center idea, which is the core idea of like the notes that you're taking with branches coming out and different keywords. And then from those different keywords. And so you're mapping all the connections. And memory is like that. Like all memory is associative. And so it's a really good way to take notes because it's very much in alignment with the way your brain learns in the first place, because your brain does not learn just like a long thing. This is like that, which reminds me of that, which reminds me of this, right? So I was taking notes in that kind of way. So I showed him the notes. He was blown away by that, which led him lean into the conversation a little bit more, maybe. And in those conversations, at some point, I said, hey, would you ever be interested in doing something with Jay Abraham? And he was like, I would love to do something with Jay Abraham. And I was like, well, I can't promise it, but I think I might be able to do something. And so then I went to Jay, right? Because he had left that door open for me. And I said, Jay, you know, I'm in this coaching program with this guy that really is one of the big guys online right now. You're not online yet. I really think you should be online. Why don't the three of us do a program together? And he's like, I'm open to that. And so I introduced the two of them. We flew out to California and the beginning happened. Now, I was the low man on the totem pole at that point. So we split it a third, but I was doing about 90% of the heavy lifting, right? As it should, right? Like, because it was my opportunity to get my name on the marquee and to, you know, be somebody. And we did that for about 2 years. And we made a lot of money together. And then Stephen and Jay had a falling out, which happens very often in Jay's relationships. And so the end of my gravy train was over. And then I went on to start coaching. And my very first group of clients, because of the notoriety that I had from being associated with Jay and the offline successes I had, got me Ryan Deiss, Russell Brunson, Telman Knutson, Mike Filsain, Stu McLaren, like, and so on and so forth. And that was the beginning of that. But the way that, so let me talk about Mark for a second, and then I'll reflect back on what allowed me to kind of get both of them to be who they are in my life today, right? Because like that with Jay then just blossomed into a bunch of things. And to this day, we share clients. Sometimes we take on clients together. Jay doesn't have mastery of the internet like I have. So a lot of times he'll ask me to hop on a call with one of his clients to give my best advice as it relates to the internet. And I do the same. Like I will ask Jay sometimes to hop on with clients of mine because I know his brain will see things that I don't see, and he'll be able to give my clients a tremendous amount of value, just like sometimes I do for his clients. But with Mark, I started with that first project with Stephen and Jay. Jay sent me to AWAI to have them be, which was American Writers and Artists Institute copywriting program, copywriting training that was that Mark Ford owned a piece of, but was also like in the Agora universe. And he sent me over there, or told me to go contact them because their offices are probably about 6 blocks away from where I live. And I was going over there to get them to be an affiliate for this teleseminar series that me, Jay, and Stephen were doing. And they were an affiliate. And I hit it off with some of the people at AWAI. And then that led me to doing some more stuff with them. And AWAI was like a spin-off kind of sister company to Early to Rise, which was all about Mark. And I didn't even know who Mark was, except I had heard of him once before because I had had some success in direct mail, and I was approached asking if I would contribute to this product. And when they shared the sales letter for the product, it was all about Mark. And it was such a good sales letter that I said, yes, I'll contribute to the product, and you don't have to pay me, because they were offering to pay me. I said, I just want the product, right? And so I had some familiarity with Mark, but not a lot. But at Early to Rise was Will Bonner, Bill Bonner's son. And I knew who Bill Bonner was, right? One of the richest copywriters at that time, let alone how wealthy he is today. He certainly, he's the only billionaire, he's the only copywriter that became a billionaire that I'm aware of. I don't even think Ogilvy made it to billionaire status before he died, but maybe he did, who knows? But Bill Bonner's still alive and a multi-billionaire at this point. But anyway, I met Will. Will and I became friends. And I asked Will, why are you here? Like, why are you here in Southern Florida working at Early to Rise? And he said to me that my dad thought I should be here because he wanted me to learn from Mark. And I figured, well, hell, if a billionaire is sending his son to learn from this guy, then maybe this would be a good guy for me to learn from, right? So I did everything in my power to help Early to Rise. And when I helped them so much that they felt like they needed to do something for me, and they asked me what could they do for me, and this was a couple years later, wasn't right away, right? They just so happened to ask me after I had released the manifesto, right? And so when they asked me what they could do for me, I said, you could get me some time with Mark, right? And so they did. And I sat down with Mark, and I kind of told him where I was at. And I wanted some advice. And he gave me that advice, which was very helpful. And during that conversation, he also tried to buy my business. And I declined. And as we're talking here, I'm just trying to pull it up. Hold on a second. There it is. Let's see here. I think it was in this one. Hold on. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So after, yep. No, I don't think that's it. Hold on one sec. I know that it will be worth it if I can find it. Maybe it's in the first one. Hold on. Let's see. No, it has to be in the second one, I think. Oh, no, it was in the final chapter. Yes. So I meet with Mark, and he makes an offer for my business. I declined, but he also tells me that his door is always open to me. And so from that, I start meeting with Mark, hanging out with Mark from time to time. And but he also wrote an email the day after I met with him that he sent to the Early to Rise file. And the subject line of that email was, my door is always open, but they never come. And it was about how he met this guy and who had pulled a lot of strings to get some FaceTime with him, and that the people that worked for him, the person who actually arranged for that to happen, sent him an email thanking him for taking the time with me, and how funny it was, or unusual it was, that here was this guy that had done so much for the company, and all he wanted in repayment was some time with Mark, and that this guy who got that time for me could sit down with Mark anytime he wanted to and hardly ever takes him up on that offer, right? And so obviously, like, I had started to create a relationship with Mark through that initial meeting, and I really seized upon it. And so those were the two of how I met those two guys. But what I also realized was that, and I would say I'm in the same place these days, I get presented with so much more opportunity than I could ever say yes to. And I don't have time to do all the things I would like to do. So there's something very exciting about talking to someone who is earlier in their growth and in their life, and having that person who's got stuff going on, right? Because it's not pleasant talking to someone who's struggling really bad, right? Like, you don't feel empowered and great about life when you're talking to someone like that. But when you're talking to someone young who's got a lot of stuff going on and they're sharing it with you and they're asking for advice, you get swept up in it. And when you get swept up in it and you give them advice and then they act on it, it's like they gave you some time because you get to live vicariously through them. And I got early on that was kind of why Jay would want to talk to me more and Mark would want to talk to me more, because they didn't have time to pursue all the things they would like to do. And they could recommend that I do things, and I would actually do those things, and I would execute them well, and I would get results, and they could live vicariously and get confirmation of their ideas, that their ideas actually work, because I was executing them, right? Which made them lean into the relationship more and want to give me more, because, like, they don't have enough time to validate all their ideas, and they could share their ideas with me and I would validate it for them, not because I was trying to validate it for them, because I was trying to be successful, and they were giving me ideas on how I could be more so successful. And so that was the value I was providing them. And then I always made it I've always made it a priority to me or them or whatever, that when I would share an idea or a thought or anything that came from Mark or Jay, I made sure that everybody in the world knew that that idea did not come from me, right? It came from Mark or Jay, so that there was also a payoff there, that I was singing their praises and I was keeping them relevant, and so on and so forth. And so I'd say that, like, that was the benefit that they got. And the benefit that I got was I had these great men in my corner who were there to help me every step of the way. I found the document. I'll just show it to you really quick. There. So here, let's see if I can share. I think I can. Hold on. Present there. Slides, share screen. Don't show these tips again. Share screen, and then a window, final chapter. This was the third report that I ever wrote. Do you see this page? Oh no, there it is. I gotta like now pull it in.
Let me add it to the stream.
Okay, yeah. So here, right, like, there's the headline, right? You see the subject line right there. I'm going to try and zoom into it, and let's see here. And I'll zoom in one more time, right? And it said, this was the email that he sent out the very next day after I met with him. Or no, I guess several weeks ago. Well, we'll see, right? Several weeks ago, Patrick Coffey, early to rise director of internet marketing, told me that Rich Schefren, a well-known internet guru, wanted to meet with me. So the three of us got together a few days ago. The subject of the meeting was how to locate, hire, and groom superstars. Rich had an enviable problem. Taking advantage of his relationship with early to rise significant internet businesses, he launched a consulting business that quickly took in $3.5 million. That's right after I had launched the Internet Business Manifesto. I have the beginnings of what could be a very good business, he told me. I don't want to screw it up by not surrounding myself with great people who can help me build something sustainable. I told him I'd be happy to help him in any way I could. So we got right to the discussion of the three key positions he intended to fill and the candidates he pre-selected. I had met Rich once or twice before. He'd spoken at our conferences and sold products to our people, but I had never spent much time talking to him. The hour we spent together the other day convinced me that he's very bright and knows both marketing and the internet very well. In fact, I was so impressed with his skills and his character that I suggested Early to Rise might be interested in buying his business. He wasn't interested in losing his independence, he told me, but he'd be happy to work together on other projects in the future. We went back to a lively conversation about how our industry works and the type of people who are best for key positions. At the end of the hour, we shook hands and promised to talk again. My door is always open to you, I told him. Afterwards, thinking back on our meeting, I wondered if Rich's reason for making the appointment was to get my advice on hiring or to get some time with me so we could get to know each other better. In either case, I was impressed. For years, I've been advising Early to Rise readers to build their business network by getting informational interviews with people they would like to do business with. If that was Rich's intention, he succeeded, good for him. If, on the other hand, he simply wanted my advice, good for him too. If he had both objectives in mind, he was doubly rewarded. Not only had he gotten some pretty good advice about how to hire great people, he had secured my friendship and won my admiration. And although I'm sure he didn't plan it, he also received a possible offer to buy his business. After the meeting, Patrick sent me the following email. I just wanted to drop a note to thank you for meeting with Rich and me today. Rich has done a lot to help us in the past, and I feel like we owed him one. I know he really wanted to get your advice, and I'm sure he appreciated it. Just going to that meeting reminded me that I need to schedule more time to meet with you. Though I'm not in the same position as Rich, I feel I learned a lot from your conversation. I have a great resource right next door, and I never seem to use it. It's funny. Rich is willing to change his schedule, call in favors, cancel appointments to meet with you, and all I have to do is ask, right? So that was the email that Mark sent out just a couple of days after the very first time I met him. And, you know, my goal was to get FaceTime and to get some advice. I never thought that necessarily he would take me under his wing and I would be like, you know, treated almost in certain ways like a son, right? And it certainly has been that. I can close this now. But that was that. And so I think I had this like hole in my heart and I was looking for that. And I think that kind of energy gets picked up by other people. And it wasn't as if I consciously was like, I'm going to do everything I can and possible to impress these guys so they want to know me better. But subconsciously, that very much could have been going on because just like you want to please your dad, I was trying to please these guys and it worked, right? Like unconsciously. And and I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have those guys in the beginning really pointing me.
Do you feel like now you are in, I don't know if you've consciously processed this. Do you feel like you're sort of in that position with Matt?
I'm not necessarily in that position with Matt, but I am in that position with other people. I've like the online casino business that I'm involved with. That client disappeared on me, owing me $20,000. And then he came back into my life calling me and saying like, hey, I need more coaching. And I know I owe you $20,000. Can I see you next Friday? And is it okay if I give it to you in cash? And I was like, one, yes, I'll always take cash. And two, I'll see you Friday, right? So that was a meeting because like anytime that someone rises to the occasion, right? Like they might have disappointed you, but they make good on it. Like I did with Jay. It just opens the door to potentially more. And, you know, I was insanely impacted by Mark. And then he sent that email out like a couple of days after I met him, which totally like, you know, it feels really good to read that even to this day, right? And that's over 20 years ago. But I continue to make money for Jay and he continues to make money for me, right? I helped Mark by helping grow Agora, right? I have $1 billion testimonial from them. So I certainly made an impact on Mark financially, although that was never like my main goal in life. But I am, just like I would want to do right by my dad if he was a different person, I wanted to do right by these guys. So I certainly have played that role for a bunch of people, never consciously, but it's just the way it is. And I do live vicariously through people. And I would say, like, I want to have the biggest impact I can have on Matt, but Matt is a little bit different, and I can't, because I need Matt in areas where I am weak. I can't really be the guy that lays the groundwork for him of what he needs to do, right? I like there's a lot of times where like I'll say to Matt, like, I don't know I don't know the answer here. I just need you to find the answer and do it, because like, that's your role, not mine, right? Like, but yeah, I've also, one thing though, and this is a total tangent, so I'll share this, then I'll be quiet and you can guide, is that I've been in business now for a little over 30 years. And this was something that I was talking to my daughters about last week. So it's very present in like my awareness at the moment. I've tried to never burn a bridge ever in my entire life. It means a lot to me that whether or not like my work with someone ends well or ends great, that either way, that the door always stays open, like what Mark shared, like in that email. And along the way, also, though, I've had a lot of superstars come in and out of my life for different reasons, right? And one of the things that I've tried to do my best at was when those superstars have come into my life, and it could be in anything, to stay in touch with those people, because you never know, right? To be there for those people and to just kind of keep them in my life. And that could be like the person that created the sales training program for my hypnosis companies. That could be, it could be anything, right? But you don't get the opportunity to have that many people come in and out of your life. And when someone is super great at something and they come into your life, staying in touch with those people over time builds you a Rolodex that is insanely, insanely valuable. And one of the ways that I'm able to help my clients today is I'm able to pick up the phone and call those superstars that have come across me over the last 30 years and be able to make magic happen for my clients, right? And so one of the things, like in the commercial real estate appraisal business, that's making that business grow like a wildfire is the guy that created the sales training process for my hypnosis company back in 1999 and 2000, right? But this is now 25 years later, and we're still in touch, and I'm able to pick up the phone because, like, there's a lot of people that probably sell sales training and sales process and all that are absolute crap, just like there's a lot of people who sell anything that are absolute crap. And I know the one guy that consistently delivers because he delivered to me 20 years ago, and I've stayed in touch with him ever since that time. And I would recommend that to anybody. Like, anyone great comes into your life, you want to recognize that you don't meet that many great people throughout your life. And if you can stay in touch with those people long term, right, it will help you and it will help them. And that's what I was teaching my daughters the other day, right? That like most people that come through your life are zeros. Every once in a while, you meet a 10, and you want to make sure that those 10s stay in your life. There's one college professor that I'm still in touch with that, made an impact on me when I was younger, right? And I still to this day call them, right? So I don't know if that illustrates a point and is helpful, but it felt good talking about it.
Yeah, it illustrates the point. But I think it really does. Well, personally, like in my brain, it highlights a deficiency I have, which I feel like a lot of my relations are copy oriented. It's all very, very, very direct response and copy based. A lot of my entire community, people that I help, people that I work with, it's all copy focused. And I find myself almost at a loss. Like, what can I provide besides copy? And it's
what I would say to you, and I don't know if this will land correctly or not, but I'll say it anyway. Like, I would say that, like, if you enjoyed coming over my house that time to like watch the UFC fights, I didn't know it afterwards, right? And like, if you want to cultivate things that are bigger and better, right? Because I never heard from you about that time, it never became a priority to me to make sure you were alerted the next time.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying that because I'm looking for you to tell me one thing. I had an interaction with you. I saw an opportunity that if you wanted to be something, it to be more, you didn't seize upon it in that time. Right. And so much of it is seizing upon it during that time when, whether someone does something nice for you or you pay someone to do something for you and they exceed your expectation or whatever. Right. You have this like moment in time to take that relationship in a way that is like now along that track. And so in that interaction, like I was kind of surprised, and that's why I'm sharing it now, right? Like it's keep me up at night or anything like that, right? But I was like, oh, I wonder if Kyle had a good time. And if he did, I'm surprised I didn't hear from him that he had a good time, because the next time I would make sure that he was invited. And if he didn't have a good time, well, then okay, then that makes sense then why I didn't hear from him again, right? Like on that, right? Like so much of it is just minimal shit that most people overlook. It's like Todd Brown came over my house on Tuesday last week, and it takes literally 30 seconds for me to send a text after he leaves that says, man, I appreciate you. Every time that we get together, when you leave, I am happier that you were here. Right? That's all that has to be said. It literally took 30 seconds, right? And Todd goes home and is like, like that felt good. It's good to know that Rich values me and that like he's appreciative, right? Like that's it. Like it was literally no skin off my back. And I think people overlook those opportunities. And because they overlook those opportunities, they're also not thought of again. Of course, I sent Mark a beautiful thank you note, right? Of course, like I've tried, like when I paid Jay back, I pointed out that he got his money ahead of time, right? Like I've done those things. And it's those little things that like just let that person know where they stand in your book that makes a lot of difference, that makes them want to lean in a little bit more. And if you don't do that, you lose the opportunity. Not that like you can come over my house anytime, dude. That's not what I'm saying, right? Yeah. But the point is that I don't think about you because when I do it, because it wasn't like, oh, geez, that was great, man. And anytime you do that, please let me know because I'd love to come over again. Right? Yeah. That's what you said. But if you don't say it, then it doesn't happen.
Yeah. So two pieces here. So first off, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with me because the way that you say it and the way that I interpret it is feedback. No ego strike. Like I'm like, okay, I get it. I should do better about that. So I think there's a lot of impact and power behind that statement. Like if you had a good time, I don't know it. And there's two reasons why I think so. Because one, honestly, I think I've said this a billion times. Like to anyone who invites me to social events, like, sorry, I'm gonna be awkward. Like I don't, I don't necessarily know how to. Right. I was on stream with my friend, Sean McIntyre, right?
Yeah, he worked at the desk next to me.
Yeah,
for many a time.
So I did a stream with him on Friday, and I just remember this one line. He's like, "Yeah, Kyle was at this networking event, and something." And I was like, "Dude, I'm just like so bad. I pay like $5,000 to come to this thing, like, between flights and hotels and all this shit. And then I got like 2 fucking business cards and phone numbers. And most of the time, people were coming up to me for what I said on stage. And again, like I sort of know I'm at this opportunity moment. I'm in this moment where someone's talking to me. Someone's like, 'Hey, I love what you said.'" And I'm like, thanks. And it's like, I know that I don't understand, like as much as I understand things like sales process, like how to have that conversation, how to guide someone through a sales letter, how to do this and that. When it comes to, like even whenever you were telling your story about Mark, my questions were like, what do you talk about? I had Mark on a podcast for 2 and some odd hours, and we talked about girls. And it was like, I know that I'm sitting in front of like a gazillionaire who could probably change my life. I don't even know how to broach the topic. And maybe there's a part of me that feels sort of insecure, unworthy to ask this person for direct help.
Right. And not everything has to be accomplished up front. But if you didn't send him like a real personal note after he got off saying like, wow, that was so fun. I had such a great time talking to you. Like, I would love the opportunity to do it again. Then you missed, not that like, also you could reach out to Mark anytime and I'm sure he's going to be cool with it, but you
Yeah.
missed the
I am
opportunity.
going to send him like a follow-up now, like
It
today,
doesn't
like, as
have
soon
to
as.
be like this big thank you card or anything like that. It
Yeah.
could be as simple as a text, but Mark doesn't know if he leaves here that that meant anything to you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so that's what I mean. It's so small and yet so few people do it. Right. And because of that, you stand out when you do. Right. Like, you know, I have all these serious coaching conversations all week long. And, you know, if one client sends a text like a day later and says, you know, some of that advice was so spot on. I so appreciate this coaching relationship. And maybe everyone thinks that, maybe nobody thinks that. I have no idea, right? But the person that sends that text stands out.
Yeah. And then the second point I wanted to make was, again, like, because I was like, did I not say anything? I did look back at our text history and I did say something, but I do think that I could have said something deeper. I basically just said, "Hey man, thanks so much for having us. It was awesome."
Right.
And you even mentioned that we forgot to have the drink because we didn't drink together
Right.
whenever I was there. Um, and then you forwarded the picture that we all took and said, "Hope you had a great time. You need to get out more."
Right.
But so it's like, yeah, I can see like I even when I attempt to connect, I'm failing to, or I'm not making a big enough impact, or I'm coming to surface level. I feel like I'm aware of this, and even the awareness even sets me back further because now I kind of avoid social interactions altogether. I
But
avoid,
why? Because
well,
I'm an
because
introvert. I'm socially awkward, and I just kind of am okay saying like, "Hey, I really appreciated that. That was really
yeah.
cool. Like, I would love to, you know, it's like it takes nothing." And then that
Mm,
also what that does is it frees you up to have the bullshit conversation with Mark, knowing that if this is an enjoyable conversation, at some point you'll get to the meaty shit. Because at some
mm,
point, Mark might be like, "Hey, man, you know, we talk a lot, but you know, I could really help you if you told me what was going on in your business." Like, and he
mhm.
might bring it up, right? But like, he won't bring it up maybe the first time, but as you get closer, like that's what generally happens in relationship.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's what it is. I feel like there's a veil that I'm failing to puncture at a personal level where it's 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 that connection that's really lacking. Like again, like someone comes up to me, "Wow, dude, I couldn't you made me completely rethink my business, what you said on stage." And I'm just like, "Hey man, thanks. That's neat."
Well, so two quick things there, right? It took a lot of personal work for me to get something. And that, like, a psychologist told me years ago, you know, you don't have to do anything to have value. You realize that, right? And I'm like, I hear the words you speak, but they do not land, right? Like, that I can appreciate that that's the case, but yet I do not see myself that way. And therefore, I do not act that way. And she said to me, well, let that marinate. Just see like what you see and see if over the next week you see anything differently. And Todd Brown came over my house that week, and I recognized that I was happier because Todd was in my house and he didn't have to do anything, right? Like just Todd's presence made me happy because I really, really like Todd, right? And Todd has done a lot of amazing stuff for me. It's not that, right? And I'm not saying Todd is good for nothing, but I'm saying Todd doesn't have to do anything to be valuable. And so, like, seeing that experience personally was the first crack for myself to see that I can be valuable to someone else, not because I'm doing something for them, not because I'm such a great marketer and I have some words of wisdom or can make a difference in their business life or what have you, that I can just be valuable to that person because I'm here. Right. And I wouldn't say that like then magically the next day everything was different. But like that crack in the door of seeing that, and that there were many people after that experience, that there were many people that like didn't have to do a damn thing for me, and yet I would extract so much like happiness, value, what have you, just because of my feelings for them and their presence, right? And so that for me has been something that has really helped me a lot. And then one of the things that helps you get to that is that second thing that you said, right? Like, so when I was going through my midlife crisis, I did a lot of transformation programs and I was greatly impacted by them. And then I wanted to do transformation programs related to business because I saw how powerful they were at kind of altering the person. And I was like, wow, if we could alter people and alter them in a way that made them better entrepreneurs, that would be really something really exciting. And so I did a couple of transformation workshops at my office. And I always did it with a co-leader because I am not that person. I don't ever put myself out there pretending that my personal life is anything to be modeled. And so that's one. And two, I don't feel comfortable ripping someone's current life apart, because most people, even if they want something different, they're attached to what they have and they're unwilling to give up what they have to get what they truly want. And so I always needed a partner in that who was willing to like get into the shit and have that person see what they really needed to see before they got off, what they really needed to get off to get what it was they wanted. And so on the very first day of the very first workshop that I ever did doing this, I only did it 3 times. It was like a test. And then we got people amazing results, like results that still to this day blow me away. But like, I just couldn't take the emotional roller coaster. These people hated me after the first day. They loved me on the third day. Like it was, and selling transformation is difficult. So I was like, it's not worth, the juice ain't worth the squeeze for me. But the first time I did it, I limited it to 8 people. And the 8 people had no idea what they were buying. They only bought because I had made them all a ton of money. And they were like, if Rich is offering something new, I'm going to go to it because like I always seem to make money from it. Right. And one of the people before the thing started came over to me and wanted to let me know like how big of an impact I had on their life. Right. Like, and it was a big impact. Right. And they were there like profusing their, how grateful they were. And it went in one ear and out the other ear. And I thanked them and they walked on their way. And my co-leader in the transformation event said, "What the hell was that?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "That person was trying to give you a gift. That person was telling you that how valuable you were to them in their lives, and that like their lives would be so different today if you hadn't shown up. And when they gave you that gift, you just kind of pushed it aside, did nothing with it, and just pretended like it never happened and gave them a thank you and moved on. You did not take even a second to let that like resonate and land in you and appreciate what you did for that person, what that means to you as a human being, and anything like that, which is what they were trying to give you, that they were trying to give you a gift back and you didn't take it. Like they said it, and I don't know if that person noticed that you didn't take their gift, but me as an expert in transformation and all this kind of stuff easily saw that that person was trying to give you a gift and you didn't take it. And she said, you might want to, going forward, when someone takes the time to tell you that you really made an impact in their life, maybe it's worth a second or two to actually listen to what they're trying to tell you and absorb the appreciation they have for you. And I think if you start doing that, right, the other part, understanding that you are a valuable person and that you provide value in many other ways other than just what you do, even though that's more about what you do, starts making a difference. And, it can go too far the other way where you think you're so great and you walk on water. But most people, if they're not starting from that place, then they're not going to get ever to that place. But they can get to a place where they feel a little bit better about themselves and who they are, and they can feel a little bit better about the impact that they have. And because of that, like, it's much more freeing to then be who you truly are, right? And it's kind of like, I think the reason that I'm okay telling you that I was trying to beat Jay for that $5,000 in the beginning, or that like I screwed him over the first time, is because like I'm so comfortable today in my own skin, because like I've had so many people give me the gift back of the impact I've made in their lives. And so I'm okay admitting how fucked up I am in so many other ways, because like I recognize today that like who I am as a person is valuable. And therefore I'm much more willing to admit, one, the mistakes I've made in the past, and two, to make myself vulnerable in any conversation to say, like, man, that was really great. And I really appreciate you. And I really thank you for taking the time, like, here to invite me to kind of share my story and to kind of reflect on what got me here. Right. And I think it's all like it all kind of comes together. And, you know, I'm an introvert, and you know, I was told something else that I thought was really valuable that I shared with a client today who was coming over like a really hard time. And it is that something that I learned from also a different therapist, I've done a lot, right? Like, was that all trauma, and everybody's had trauma, right? It's different for every person. And what seems small as a child could be at like now as an adult could seem small, but back then when you were that little kid actually was huge, right? All trauma happens in relationship to another person, right? You don't have trauma by yourself. Like all trauma happens in relationship. And the natural like proclivity, the natural tendency is that when you experience trauma is to isolate. But no trauma is ever healed in isolation. Trauma is caused in relationship, and the only way it's ever overcome is in relationship. And so the natural inclination to isolate and to detach is actually the very worst thing you can ever do to overcome that, like to overcome it. And knowing that, right, makes my Mondays and Fridays when I'm talking to other experts that much more valuable to me, because even though I'm standing alone in this room, right, it's conversations like this that like keep me out of isolation. Because if I was left to my own devices, I would sit at home all alone all day, right? And that would take its toll over time. So I need these artificial things, right, to pull me out and get me talking to a lot of people, so that like I don't let my tendency to isolate actually cause the damage that it would cause if it was left to its own devices and really controlled my day.
Yeah. And now I want to ask you that's good stuff. Like, I think that's very deep, very personal. I really appreciate you opening up and sharing all that. I feel like everyone who has a personal life can relate to that, because I feel like, especially in this field, we have an online persona. And so part of
Sure.
the Kyle Milligan show, and the reason that this channel exists aside from Copy Squad, is because this is
Right.
where I'm just going to be a little bit more, I'm going to just be a guy, not a copy guru. Right. So I like that this is the kind of content that I love having here, and seeing this realness. And this is another benefit of being over here on this channel, is we're talking marketing a little bit because we all do it for a living all day, every day, but we
Mm-hmm.
get a chance to explore like what it's like to be a person trying to do all this stuff. And I think one of the biggest things, someone asked me today, when am I ready to go get a client? I was like, you're never ready to go get a client. Just go get one. Like, I was never ready to be a copy chief. I was asked to be a copy chief, and I had to learn how to be one.
Right.
So I want to ask you now, in retrospect, looking back when you were doing your transformation project, how would you have responded? Because I just had this experience 3 days ago. How,
Mm-hmm.
if even 2 days ago, how would you have responded to that person who came up and said, like, your insights, what you shared and taught me, I have this shit every day in my Instagram
Right.
DMs, on
I
YouTube
would have,
comments. What would you respond to that person at that moment?
not a question of how I would have responded, right? It's a question of how I would have listened and how I would have absorbed it, right? Like I might have just thanked them and they would have went on their way. That's not really the issue about, it's not about them at all. It's about me. It's about whether or not I take a second to really reflect on what that difference made for them, right? Instead of just being uncomfortable and trying to get them out of my way quickly. Although I don't think that person felt that, right? But that's what was going on for me. Geez, this is an uncomfortable conversation. I don't like it, right? Like that's what was going on in my head at that moment, right? Like, yeah, it's great that I made all this difference for you. And now, like, can I get like this conversation over as quickly as possible? Because like this just feels icky to me. Instead of doing that, like just taking a second in here to be like, wow, like because I do what I do, this person's life is very different. And isn't that cool? Right. Like, and then maybe still feeling a little bit uncomfortable and letting them go on their way, but letting what they were trying to give me actually get in. That's the thing, right? Like fully appreciating that this, like, they don't have to say what they're saying. They're not trying to get anything from me by saying it. It wasn't led to, which is why I'm asking you. No, there wasn't any of that, right? They were just really trying to give me a gift to let me know that my teaching, like the things I do matter, and it mattered for them. And they wouldn't be in the same place that where they are today if I didn't do the things that I do. And that's like, it was just a question of absorbing it because for years I didn't. It makes me uncomfortable. Right. And so it still makes me uncomfortable because I'm not a narcissist and it doesn't, like, that's not my reason for existence. But I can at least appreciate that when I let it in, it does feel good and it fills me up a little bit more. And it makes taking on the next big task a little bit easier because I've let in some of that impact to recognize that, like, I do good things and I do make a difference. And that, like, I'm not just in it for the money, right? Like, and I might have thought those things anyway, but I might not have believed it the way I believe it today because I let enough people tell me and share with me the gift that I gave them and the impact that it made for them. Because I take a second to absorb it before I send people on their way.
That's that's amazing stuff. I feel like that's gonna, I think just now what you've shared on this podcast, like for all the good that you've done in the marketing space and all the people you've helped with consulting and your live streams and your webinars and your trainings and your books, I think just sitting here and sharing your story, even the small glimpses into your personal development and the way that obviously you believe in self work and you've gone through therapy and you've reflected and you've shared uh quite a lot here. Like even I personally, like I have a big giant note in all caps, follow up with Mark, because I have to think now, did I even follow up? Like, and it's not from a place of I didn't think it was. I told all my friends, all my family, I told anyone who knew me in the internet marketing space. I just had a podcast, Mark Ford's most amazing thing ever, but I'm not sure if I told Mark Ford that. And that seems like I feel like I had to have sent something because I don't think I'm that daft. But like I feel like I probably didn't say it. Maybe I'm trying to look cool or like not impacted by it or like not like over the moon. But that was like I think I told him on the podcast it was the highlight of my career. And we didn't hardly talk about, business or copy to that depth. It was just that I could sit there and have a cigar with Mark Ford. And that
Right.
I coming from a dude who was trying to sell a novel who, similar to your Jay story, like I was going to steal the Agora training. I was going to go get the copy training. I was going to quit the job and then I was going to go sell my novels and move to Costa Rica. That was my plan. But then I got in the door and I was like, just like when you put the tape on, I was like, this is pretty damn good. I want to hang out here a little bit more. And then I end up where I am today, who nobody would have seen it coming. So yeah, like I'm definitely gonna follow up with Mark again, even if I did before, and I'm gonna make it a point going forward. I don't know how I'm gonna address this lack of connection I have, because the way that you describe the icky is sort of how I feel. And again, like I'm like, part of me is like ashamed to say it. I walk into your house
Mm-hmm.
and there's, this cornucopia of famous successful internet marketers, and I'm like, oh, like I just like who is this dude walking with the flower shirt unbuttoned to his navel, and like I in a way I don't carry that same sort of, oh, I'm valuable just because I walked in the door sort of feeling that you're describing. I don't walk in any other room. I do in any other
Right.
room. I sort of have that sort of entitlement, but not in that room. And so I think
Right.
that comes out when I got all these people and all these opportunities. Mike Ward was at the event this weekend, and Braddock disappeared for like an hour or whatever. I was like, where the fuck were you? And Braddock said, I was talking to Mike Ward. And I was like, oh, I want to talk to Mike Ward. And then in my head, I'm like, well, what would you talk about? And for those who don't know, Mike Ward was the publisher at Money Map back when Money Map was like a $300 million company.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that experience is almost the story of my life, especially as I hit the ceiling in my career now, where what I'm lacking is personnel. What I'm lacking is networking connections, because I don't have that super powerful operations guy near or around me to help me. And now I even have a bit of shame about, I'm in Todd Brown's top one,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure I frustrate the ever loving shit out of Todd, because Todd makes every effort to help me grow my business and basically offers up his team as a surrogate team for me. And for whatever reason, I absolutely avoid it. He offered me Teddy, his COO, to do like 3 meetings to build up my dashboards and systems like 2.5 months ago. Guess
Mm-hmm.
who hasn't fucking scheduled the meeting with Teddy?
Right.
And I don't know what it is, this mental block I have. I know I pay for that service too. I'm in the mastermind. I'm paying the fees. Um, in this way, I am my own worst enemy at this right now. This is probably my biggest obstacle, is getting out of my own way. And
It's
you,
easy to overcome. It just starts with like the smallest degree of follow up. And like, if you wanted to make a bigger impact with Mark today than you even could have in the follow up, then like, if you texted someone immediately after about like how awesome it was to having Mark on, then I would take a screenshot of that and send it to Mark and be like, I don't know if I conveyed to you how meaningful that time was that we spent together. And maybe I can't, but like, I wanted to share with you, like, what I said about it afterwards to someone close to me. Right. Or
mm,
like, 'cause you've already done it. Right. Or if you never did, like, you could send them a clip of this talking about it, and that would be the same thing. Right. And
yeah,
then it's so much more real. Right. Because it's not like you're just saying it in this moment. You actually said it to someone else. And now you're thinking in hindsight, like, I don't know if I ever told you. Right. And so
mm-hmm,
here's like this thing I sent to someone else talking about it, because maybe like in the moment, I never thought that, like, and he'll probably just like be like this, but because I know Mark really well, right? Like, but it will still register. Like, it will
mm-hmm.
still register. And it will also be meaningful to you. And it will make reaching out to Mark the next time for you just a little bit easier, because you'll remember that you shared that with him.
That's something I wonder about, and I appreciate that. I'm gonna take that to heart.
Yeah.
Like how, so then, because I can see it, I can see the next step of how this impedes my progress. I can already see it, which is I'll follow up here, and, because Mark is a super nice guy. He'll
Yeah.
say, "Hey, it was great anytime," and then it'll be something like that. So he'll say something super nice and sweet. I know he will, and then I think that's where it'll end again for Kyle. Like that's where it's like, okay,
Because
now
you,
I feel like I won't follow up again. What's
well,
that?
but it won't, because you left the door open in a way so that the next time you need something, or the next time you want to ask him a question, it'll just be a little bit easier. It really will. I do have to jet, and I hate that I
Yeah,
do.
yeah. Yeah,
But
no, I mean, I think we're reaching like
yeah,
a great stopping point for all the stuff that we've shared and covered here. I think, I, again, really appreciate going down this road. This is how it usually happens. It's usually
right.
towards this part, we get through all the marketing stuff, we get through all the history, and then we end up on this, like, now we're just left with our souls to bear.
Yeah.
And then the last hour is always this, but I appreciate us, getting down this path and hearing everything that you have to share. If you want to, plug or
I
how
don't want to
people can
plug
reach
anything.
you or
I
anything.
gotta go, but what I
Yeah.
will end is this, is that we live close together. Like when you first moved down here, I told you we met at the cigar bar, and I told you, like, reach out. Like, you're in a new place. Like, I know a lot of people here. I can easily, whatever, that invitation is still open to you, right? Like, and that it's never too late to, like, just make that small little change. And this is such a small little change. And then, like, what I know that you will see if you just, like, heed that advice is that the next time you have a big challenge like that hits you in the face, you'll have all these open conversations where you've expressed gratitude, where you've connected with people, and you'll recognize that you have a lot more people to call who could help you out in that situation, right? And you're not doing it for that reason, but that's just one of the benefits of it. There is no problem that I can, like, that will come my way that I don't have a bunch of people to reach out to who would gladly help, because I do take that extra minute to just kind of make people clear that what they did, where they are, is meaningful to me. And because of that, like, when I'm in trouble, when I'm flailing, when I'm struggling, when I'm just keeping my head above water, there are so many people who want to help, because, like, I just preceded it by being real, being authentic, and being grateful for each and every person. I got a jet, but it's been a pleasure. And we live close by, dude. Like, all you got to do is shoot me a text, tell me you want to come over, and it'd be my pleasure, or meet at the cigar bar. And if I have the time, I will gladly do it. All right.
All right. Thanks,
All
Rich.
right.
I appreciate you doing this. Take care,
My
buddy.
pleasure. Speak soon. I know we got that thing next week, or whenever.
All
All
right.
right. Bye.
See ya. Okay, so that was our podcast with Rich Schefren. So I appreciate everyone who tuned in live. We didn't really get a chance to, like, kind of go through the chat or anything like that. We had a pretty stacked 2 hours, 15 minutes. I hope you took something away from this. I know I definitely did. Leave comments and I'll answer them when I get a chance. I thank you so much for tuning in. Until next podcast, whenever that may be. I'm not as disciplined on this channel as I am on the Copy Squad channel. But until next time, peace out, Copy Squad.